Hello, everyone. Welcome. You are watching a video archive of, I'd call it an interview, but it's going to be more of a discussion with the one and only Dr. Keith Pratt. And he is uh, he is a fellow member of our bigger, broader Chapman University family, even though we're Brandman. He's part of our Chapman family. I am truly honored to be able to have this conversation with him. Reading his book, Assessing the Online Learner. This is for EDUU 625. And he's got a lot of really amazing and grounded in both experience as well as theoretical perspectives on this whole idea of what assessment really is for us as 21st century teachers, what it means to our learners, and what are our responsibilities as teachers in this world of electronically mediated education. So I'm first going to introduce Keith and ask him to tell you a little bit of how awesome he is. And don't be shy. So Keith, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Wow. I started off my career, I guess, I was in the Air Force for 22 years, and a lot of those 22 years were spent in Anchorage, Alaska, that's where I got involved with Chapman University. I have a graduate degree from Chapman, as I was also their campus director in Anchorage for a while. After I retired from the Air Force, I wanted something to do that was a challenge, so I got into teaching. And my first job was the registrar at a technical college in Anchorage, and I was that way for a while. And I had a master's degree, and I wanted a PhD, but the guy who ran the college said there's only room for one PhD in this school. So you're either going to have to give up getting a PhD and be my registrar and maybe my dean after a while, or you can just quit and go after your PhD. So I quit. And when I started teaching, I just loved the idea, the concept of teaching face to face, but I also knew that at that point in time that there was a real need for some standards and some ideas around teaching online. And I started experimenting with that at Ottawa University in Ottawa, Kansas, many, many years ago. They were my guinea pig, and we loved it. We really enjoyed getting online and talking with each other, and that's what I made the class about. It wasn't about learning the material, but it was about taking that material and relating it to everyday experiences. And the assessments were the same thing. I found out very early on that to assess in the online environment, it had to be something different than face-to-face, because those test and quizzes, the multiple choice, those things just weren't effective. They didn't tell me anything as an instructor. As a professor, it wouldn't tell me what I needed to know about the student. I found out early on that the best way to assess a student in this environment was, number one, to get them involved in the content. Get them to understand that what we were doing meant something to them in the future, and we needed to work with that. So I learned early on to design all my classes, assessments and evaluations around the content. And what I mean by that is I would take the content and know that what I wanted to get out of that class, what were my goals and my outcomes, what the school had established as the outcomes for the class.
Right.
And in order to reach those, how would I design the class or design the curriculum to not only be an assessment and an evaluation, but to mean something to the students that they could wrap their arms around. So if you look at my classes, I really don't have a test in my classes. I do, but I don't. All my exams or tests or evaluations are built around the curriculum and something that they have to do to get involved with that curriculum. For instance, I'm teaching an org theory class right now for a school I've been teaching for 15 years, so I really don't feel like I'm teaching for them. It's just, anyway, and their final exam is to take those 12 chapters of that book and pick 5 of those chapters. And what they have to do is pretend they're a consultant to an organization. They have to take those 5 content areas, apply them to the organization, and do an evaluation of those 5 areas. And after the evaluation, the things they find that needed to be changed, that can be improved, or things that are great, they need to give me feedback to me as to how they're going to make those changes, etc., etc. And this is their final exam. They have a week to do it. They can use anything they want to finish that exam. But once they get to that point, they know where to go for the information. They know how to assess and evaluate an organization, which is a big part of the class, and they know how to give that back to me in a formal way, in APA format. So I hit a lot of the things that are required for the course in just that one evaluation. But that's the way I teach the whole class. Each week's a different type of assignment.
Right.
They do a web quest. They work together in groups to finish a case study or a project. And to this day, I've only had one student in 14 years tell me that they didn't learn anything. I lose very few students. I lose maybe one or two students per class, and the numbers I know are lower than that. But those one or two students are probably because they've got a personal issue or they just can't make it to the class like they need to. So that's basically how I designed the class, and it's very effective, I think. And I change things around every term. I put things, focus on different areas. But over the years, it's become a very effective class, I think, to myself. But I think that's the way you should address assessment and evaluation. And I know there's probably a lot of questions out there about, how do you do that, and how do you take concepts like organizational culture, and how do you put that into an assessment? Personally, the way I would do it was have them look at an organization and tell me what makes up an organizational culture. Sure, they can use what's in the book, but go out and do a little research and look at an organization, say like Walmart, and tell me how is their organizational culture epitomized? How does it look to the public? And then come back and tell me what you think. And that way they get their hands on what organizational culture is all about, but also they're feeding it back to me and telling me what their concepts are. So using that to design your classes and your assessments and evaluation I think is a good way to do that. I'm not saying that's the only thing you use. Multiple choices and true-false quizzes are a good checkpoint in classes. I mean, you can still use them, but you only use it to me to check where the students are at, how they're feeling with a course. Actually, I'd rather use something like a 2-week summary or 3-week summary of the course. Tell me how you feel. Write me a summary of the last 3 weeks and tell me what we've missed, what's the hardest, what can we change in the future, those types of things, rather than a true-false test.
Agree completely. What I do when I'm designing is, again, I do the same thing. I always work my way backwards. Usually in my courses, there is only one quote-unquote test, and usually the way I do it is some kind of midterm, which is an essay exam. I usually do a timed essay exam so that there's also bringing in the experience of having to be fluid and flexible. So everything is open book, but at the same time, it's all the different experiences and the material that the students have been playing with, not just read, answer the worksheet, but working collaboratively in wikis so that they have to synthesize and they have to put into their own words and negotiate meaning. Because, and this is where it's leading to my next question, here's what we keep hearing from high-level businesses, from advisory boards, is that graduates, whether it's K-12 or whether it's in graduate and higher, who are taking fully online courses and some blended, we're hearing a lot that people are having issues with flexibility and fluidity of the learners. Could you maybe address that for a little bit? How do you address those issues?
Wow. That's it. Essentially, that's built into all my classes because you mentioned wikis and blogs and those types of things, and I'll put those in the course according if it's useful, according to what the context of the course is. But one of the things I ran into early on with one university was their student population was so diverse, located in so many different areas, and I think Brandman's probably has the same thing. I ran into a class one time where all the students were in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And trying to put a time limit on them to take an exam was ridiculous. I mean, how could I do that? So we had to figure a way for them to do that. So, and I asked them, I said, solve the problem for me. I said, you're the students. Tell me what you can do to meet this requirement. And it was actually funny, not funny, but the way they did it was great. What they did was got together as a group and filmed themselves talking about the issues within the book. And they would focus, one person would take an area and focus on it and take 5 minutes in an audio, a video, and tell me the critical elements of this, how they would solve it. And you'd hear people joining in and saying, yeah, that's right. They did an awesome job of, within an hour, it was a time thing, the 12 of them within an hour finished that project, and they did an awesome job of it. And I would have kept the video, except they were in a restricted area, so it was classified. So I had, I couldn't keep it, so I had to get rid of it. But it was just an awesome job they did, and that's how you need to be flexible, as far as I'm concerned, with a student. Now you talk about, I'm not sure what you mean by flexibility and fluidity, and I'm assuming you mean train of thought, the way they handle problems and make those things happen.
Yeah, ownership.
A lot of that.
Terry.
Go ahead.
Ownership of the learning in a way that they can turn around and translate it into a creative fashion out in the real world.
I think you build that into your assessments. It's the kind of assessment you give them to work with. For instance, you said the students write an essay for their midterm. Mm-hmm. That's great. I mean, to have them write an essay, but is there any other way you could, and I'm just asking you as a professor, mm-hmm. Is there any other way you could present that problem to them rather than have them do an essay? Still write something, but I'll do something like an after-action report for a consulting job. Have them do it that way. Have them work as a team to complete a case study, say on a problem child within an organization, an HR problem. Give them the circumstances and have them respond to those circumstances using the material we've used in the book. Those types of things, real life experiences, I think would, instead of writing an essay, and you may want to do this on a kind of a peer review basis, have a couple of people work together and review each other's work, and then together turn in a finished product. I don't know if you're comfortable with that or not, but those types of things, and using an essay is great, but make it something that's more practical, more of use to them, something they can own when they get through. Just like you said, if it's something they can wrap their hands around. And one of the concepts a lot of them don't realize is that when they get out and they get out in the real world, they're going to be able to ask somebody about these problems. Mm-hmm. They're going to be able to grab a book and say, okay, this is what the policy is. This is what my boss says to do. And, hey, you've been here for 10 years. Can you talk to me about how we should solve this problem? They're not going to be working in a vacuum. When you get out in the real world, very few people work without working with other people. And I think that concept needs to be built into the courses that get the students to understand they're not working in a vacuum when they get out there. They're not working in a box.
Agreed very much. It's part of the reason why, particularly if we look at blended learning and fully online in the K-12 world, there's a lot of people, and this is kind of what we were talking about before, who are so afraid to give up control. And they think if you're dealing with younger students, if you give them a wiki or you put them out on a web quest, you're giving up too much control. But again, what are we hearing over and over are the success skills that people need, whether it's when they graduate high school or when they graduate with their master's or their doctorate. It's that ability to work with others and to be able to get that right. So how do we, and this is going to lead us into those INACOL standards I've got over on the side, how do we ensure that our assessments, where people are demonstrating mastery of content and learning, are also demonstrating the ability to have those kinds of, I hate to call them soft skills, that term keeps getting used, and I think it's getting used way too much, but these are real skills. How do we ensure that students have them, are able to collaborate meaningfully and work with people and find the information that they need because again, nobody knows everything anymore. And to pretend that someone will is insane. So how do we put this into assessment? How do we design this stuff?
It brings about something that a lot of people balk against is working in teams, working with other students together, peer reviewing. And again, that comes back to the fact that a lot of students are not used to working in that way. And they have horror stories about working in a team and they're doing all the work. The other three people aren't doing the work. And there are ways, I think, to handle that situation. I'm not sure if the students have access to Office or Adobe Connect. But that would be a perfect way to have them work in teams because you can set up pods and have them work and record their sessions together as they work as a team on a 2-week project. And let them know that it's a big part of their grade. You know, they can't just slack off and not do something. And give them some guidelines to work with. You know, each one may have a different skill from the other, research skills, writing skills. And they all work together to give a final product. Plus, they get separate grades too. Right. And that's one of the things that I find students have a difficulty with is if they work in a group and they have to evaluate their fellow students, is being honest about it. How do you say to your instructor that so and so really didn't do anything? Are you honest about it? Well, if they didn't do anything, that brings up a couple of questions. Why didn't you get on them? Why didn't you jump on them and bring them into the group? Why didn't you say something to them and make them aware that they're not doing? Those types of questions come up. But you still have those problems. I don't know that there's been any groups that I've worked with that hasn't had 1 or 2 people not participate. So what do? I don't know that there's a good answer to that. I really don't. I know what I do. I have everybody gets an individual grade. Everybody gets a project grade. But the ones who don't participate, I try to keep an eye on them beginning in the part of the project where they get started. If I see they're not going to participate, I'll get on the phone or I'll send them an email and emphasize the fact that they need to become involved. Usually that does the trick. If it doesn't, they'll tell me what's going on and that predicates them not doing that. Being scared to get online and work is not a good answer. Being nervous about it, I don't feel competent. Those aren't good answers. My mother's dying and I'm here watching her, that's a good answer because I can understand that. Right. But those other answers are not good to me because they need to learn to work together in a group. That is probably the only way I can think of to actually simulate working in the real world.
Agreed.
I do have them do simulations where each one of them takes on a role. For instance, in a business management course, we say that, okay, we've got a problem employee. You're his boss, you're his coworker, you're the HR person, and you're so-and-so. You guys need to come together. I'll give you the problem. I'll give you the standards you need to work with to figure out what to do with this employee. Now, this is a real-world situation. Mm-hmm. And one of the ones that's hardest to work with, I've found, is dating within the organization. That's one of the ones that gets real sticky. Ethics, morals, religious behavior, those types of things. I love to throw that one into a class who thinks they've got everything solved. Right. Yeah, they know everything. I always have a group of students that know everything. Then you throw that at them, and it's got a mix of everything in it. So what's the right answer? Maybe there's not one. And I love to do those things. And that test actually evaluates and assesses what they've learned and what kind of critical thinking skills they have, what kind of ability do they have to work with other students and depend on them to give a competent answer, all those things. So I think that's a great way to do it. But sometimes you don't have the time. Sometimes you don't have the tools. If they had tools like this, like Adobe Connect, it would be awesome. But a lot of times they don't have that ability. But they can get on the phone and talk to each other.
Yeah, and more when we've got things like Edmodo, which will let because it's not built on a wiki software, so you can actually be online having that discussion. You just have to recognize there's going to be a little lag in between, but you can still talk relatively live if you. So let me jump this over to it'd be this way, the INACOL standards. Our entire certificate and the MAE emphasis is built on INACOL and their standards for outstanding online effective teaching. And as I explained to the students, this is our second class, but in our first class, because we are serving students, and when I say we, I mean this emphasis, this certificate, people who want to teach in elementary, in secondary, and in undergrad and graduate. So, there's room for everybody, but within a call, the reason we went within a call as opposed to, let's say, ISTE, was because of all the validity we're seeing, not only in the behaviors of the teachers in the K-12 environment, but beyond. So the ones for this course are specifically E through I, but could you please talk to us a little bit about how your involvement with INACOL, how that came to be, and these standards that you worked on?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. One of the things I was really, really excited about is me and my business partner and some other people we know that are experts in the field were asked to sit on the committee that redesigned the standards for INACOL. And I thought, wow, this is going to be great, but I also thought it's going to be like every other committee I've sat on. They're not going to listen. You give input, you give your thoughts and your ideas, and then they just ignore them. In the case of this one, they did not ignore them. They tried to, because most of the people they asked to sit on that committee, and it was a variety of people from a variety of different backgrounds, had practical real-world experience teaching online, whether it was in an organizational setting, whether it was in higher education, K through 12, training, any of those things. They had a mixture of folks sitting on the, and we had some, some of the ideas I had were challenged, and the same with the rest of the people, but we came up and we agreed on these standards pretty much. I can't remember how long it took us. It was about 6 months, I think, to actually come up with something we could all buy off on, and I was pretty excited about it. So I had an involvement in these standards, and I recognized them right off the bat when you put them up on the screen. My eyes are going bad, but I could still read most of them. So I think these are all very relevant, and kind of hit at the heart of what we were trying to put across when we wrote these standards. Cool. They're relevant to what you do every day, and especially if you're going to teach online, they're relevant to that.
So there's two in particular I'd like to discuss. The first one is Standard H, which is the online teacher develops and delivers assessments, projects, and assignments that meet standards-based learning goals and assesses learning progress by measuring student achievement of the learning goals. And we were kind of talking about this before, partly with the different projects, but one of the things you and I had discussed offline was the issue that a lot of people fall into with blended and fully online, whereas they feel like the computer and the programs are doing the teaching, so my job is to tell you go, and then I'll grade your test when it's done, or I'll just tell you what the data says. Can you address how wrong that is and why?
To address that issue of assessments, projects, assignments, etc., 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 what we were trying to get at there is to make sure that the assessments, number one, meet the goals of the institution, which we all want to do, but how do you do that within a blended online environment? You can't do it with multiple choice, true, false, so you build those assessments into the class itself. And if you looked at my class now, you really wouldn't be able to tell where the assessment started and where it ended, because the whole course is I'm assessing what you're doing in the course by you're answering the discussion question. That's assessing how you feel about the material, etc. Right. All the assignments for that week are part of the assessment. Each 1 or 2 weeks, I have them write a summary of what they've learned and what they've gotten out of the class. To me, the whole class is an assessment and evaluation. Right. Because I want you to be involved in the material. I don't want me to sit in front of the class and throw up all over you, regurgitate, and give you that information. That's not my job. My job is to get you involved in the material and get you to understand what that material is, where it's at, how you can use it, how you can expand on it, how you can discuss it with your fellow students, and not have me throw it at you. Because I know the material. I don't have to do that. I need for you to do it. One other thing I use sometimes is have the students take the class and teach it for a week. How do they design a practical approach to understanding corporate culture? Have them put together an assignment for that week and actually moderate it, facilitate it, teach it. That gives them experience, et cetera, et cetera. That's just another way to get them engaged in the learning.
I get. I'm right there with you. I design from an experiential, formative perspective. So you are continuously playing with content, experiencing how to use it in this way, doing something with it, and everything is formative to create that experience that you create your understanding. I'm completely with you. What we tend to do at Brandman, our build is much closer to what K-12 instructors are used to, which is we have a designed curriculum that is broken out by the individual standards for the week that all add up to a signature assignment. But the individual instructor, and this is the thing I have the hardest time getting across to people, it's the individual instructor's responsibility to teach that class. Yes, there is a design curriculum, but you see where it's going, right? You see what the big summative signature assignment at the end is going to be. The curriculum has to serve the learners, not learners serve the curriculum. So if you see that with your group of learners, these experiences, all these formative experiences aren't getting them to where they need to be to demonstrate mastery, it's your responsibility to tweak the learning, to change the experiences, to add something in, to do a meeting, to do something to reach out and actually teach and guide your learners.
Exactly.
And that I don't think I've ever said it as clear as I just said it to you, because it's so hard when you're in a moving bus. It's like trying to paint your fingernails in a moving bus, which I'm sure you have that problem all the time.
Actually, my toenails. I paint my toenails in it.
Okay. It's a moving target.
Yeah.
And to me, that's kind of what goes down to, where it talks about competency and using data from assessments and other data sources. It's not just waiting for a bunch of numbers to come in. It's looking at formative data as in performance, as in engagement, in how many times are they actually adding to the wiki, that they're changing, elevating the discussion and going for up Bloom's taxonomy. So it's not just regurgitating, but it's actually synthesizing and summarizing and then creating. And if they're not doing that, that's my responsibility to bring in a lesson or change a lesson or pull something and get something else in there. How do you get that across to people that data isn't just a bunch of numbers?
I think you understand as well as I do that there's not many of us out there. Because I feel my job, what I'm supposed to do is get the students involved in the learning. I don't care whether they make an A or an F. If they understand the concepts, and if they embrace the learning and really get involved in it. And I have different levels of ability in the class.
Yeah.
If I'm having difficulty, like you said, getting a student to understand how we're going to get there, why don't you ask them how they would get there and what process they would use to get there? And just say, give me an agenda. Come in tomorrow, give me an outline of how you would do this as an instructor. Well, that's your job. Well, yeah, that's my job, but I'm asking you to help me out here. Get involved in the course. And a lot of times they push back, they balk at that. But sometimes, 50, 60% of the time, they'll get involved and do it. But I think that's the piece we need to understand is they need to be involved as much as we are, if not more. Sometimes I just lay my head down on the desk and cry because why don't you guys want to get involved? Well, what does it take to get an A in this class?
Exactly.
You still don't get it, do you? I don't care whether you get an A or not. I want you to learn this material, get involved in it. And sometimes it just happens that they just don't get that because they've been so enculturated in elementary school and grade school and high school and junior college, and now they're in this graduate class and they want to know how to get an A.
Right.
And they still don't get it.
Yeah, and what's the irony? If we can get them to let go of that, I got to get the A, I got to get the A, just shut up and tell me what to do to get the A. If they would just be involved in the process, they would end up authentically earning the bloody A.
Exactly.
And that's part of what I try so hard to get across to my K-12 teachers. Yeah. Because a lot of their kids that they're getting in blended but mostly fully online are there because for whatever reason the traditional face-to-face classroom hasn't worked for them. So these kids are coming in and all they think success is that A. As opposed, So I really love what you're saying about make the learner part of the process. I've actually done this working in blended and fully online with kids as young as 3rd grade. And right now I got a 2nd grade myself. I got a 2nd grade son, and we're doing this with his math. We're pulling in from Dreambox, and I'm saying to Grady, so you tell me you've got this module and that module, and this is your goal to be able to, in this much time, be able to answer this many 5-digit addition problems. How would you design your own learning pathway? And putting that responsibility / freedom of ownership on him is so empowering that I'm seeing him just like get excited in a way that I'm so jealous. I wish I'd been that excited by math. It would have made my life a lot better growing up. But so if we could kind of wrap this up in like, things to take away from this, what would you, if nothing else today, what would you hope that these learners who are learning how to be really effective, exciting, powerful 21st century teachers, what would you want them to remember when they're looking at their students and they're looking at a curriculum and they're thinking about how do I know they're learning? What do I want them to learn? What are the takeaways you really want them to hold in their heart?
Wow. The passion that you just displayed. Do you know when you get really passionate about what you're saying, you close your eyes and start talking? But the passion, the concern, the compassion for students, I like to put myself in their place sometimes and say, what would I do if I was them? What's making them do this? Why are they responding this way? And most of the time I can understand what's going on with them that way. Involvement. You've got to get the students involved in the material. You just can't have them sit back and absorb it. It doesn't work that way. They've got to get involved. And those things, I think, and I keep thinking about compassion and passion about the learning. I think if you as an instructor show or display how passionate you are about them learning and not getting just an A or a B or that kind of things, and how you're concerned about them as people too. If you show compassion and concern, you show the students you not only care about them, but care about what's going on in their life. And that helps that whole process. Get them to work with you, not against you. I don't know how else to say that.
No, I completely agree. Yeah, cool. Okay, well, thank you so very much. And the book is awesome, and it's a joy to be able to have it in class because it's a really great foundational, not garment, it's a really great foundational book to keep us, because this is a huge subject, and it's on some level it's kind of scary because it's so easy for teachers to go, well, just just tell me what I'm supposed to test. But if we go with that, just give me the test, I'll give them the test, I'll tell them what to read, we're completely pushing that 19th century mentality of just tell me what to do to get the A, just tell me what to do to get the A. And if we're not willing to break that model to get them to own their learning, there's no way they're ever going to be lifelong learners. And look, how many times have you and I had to go back to class and go back to this because everything is changing so fast.
Exactly.
Well, Keith, thank you so much. I am just so grateful.